The animals went in by two, hurrah, hurrah. The animals went in by two, hurrah, hurrah. The animals went in by two, the monkeys and the kangaroos. They all went into the ark in to get out of the rain. Everybody, animals are known. You guys were much better than the morning. Yes, come on. Praise the Lord. That's all I've got for you, really, I'm afraid. I spent all week prepping, and that was all I could come up with. No, I'm joking. I'm going to try and do two things. One, we're in our sermon series on Hebrews 11, and Jenny a few weeks ago was going to give a bit of an overview of that, and in that service, kind of God was moving really powerfully, and she ended up giving that sermon. So I want to give a little bit of an overview for us as an evening congregation, kind of going, what is it exactly that we're talking about it and why we are. But before that, I want to just frame ourselves from where we find ourselves at the moment. We are living through the biggest overhaul in human communication for 500 years. 500 years ago, the printing press was invented, and it completely and utterly changed and revolutionized human communication. Before that, if you wanted to, anything that was wanted to be said would have to be written out by hands, and you tended to have monks in monasteries that would be copying out word for word everything they get, going saw hands, and then going again, and keep going. And then the printing press was invented, and people were allowed to send to everyone, and they're allowed to print things again and again and again, and it completely transformed the way that we spoke to each other, and therefore, as a consequence, nearly all of human life and existence as we know it. We are also living in a time of mass change of human communication. It happened when one letter, repeated 3 times, came on the scene, www. Everything changed. And we're still living that, and we still aren't really sure what this means. And if you look at Facebook changes its name to Metaverse and what on earth that is going to do, and once we've fully worked out, it's going to take some time to work out what is now capable for humans to do and how we speak to one another and interact with one another, and it is going to affect everything. There is also, interestingly enough, a biblical 500-year cycle that seems to emerge. Now, some of my students have heard me do this before. Would you like me to run through the whole of the Bible and church history in about a minute? Are you interested in that? Yep. Okay, cool. 500-year cycles. There was this man, his name was Jacob. He wrestled with God, and he had his name changed to Israel, and the house of Israel, the nation of Israel, was born. A people who wrestled with God emerged. 500 years later, Moses arrived, and he liberated the people out of Egypt, and he built a tabernacle, a tent in which people could encounter God. 500 years later, Solomon came and took the tent and built a temple, a physical temple. He took something that was movable, made it permanent. 500 years later, the temple had been destroyed and was rebuilt. Temple number 2. 500 years later, a man, some of you may have heard of him, called Jesus rocks up, takes that temple and that encounter of presence with God and turned it not into a building but into a people, and the birth of the church happened. 500 years later, the Roman Empire had fallen and the Christendom went boom and went everywhere. 500 years later, we have the first split in church history, the East and the West. The Eastern Orthodox, the West Catholic Church split. 500 years later, Martin Luther, the Protestant Reformation, the Catholic Church turned into the Protestant Reformation, and instead of having 2 denominations on the planet, we had millions. Diversity, poof, changed everything. 500 years later, and we sit here in this building working out what on earth is going on. And there is, lots of people are asking these questions, lots of people are wrestling, kind of trying to go, what seems to be happening? I mean, I know lots of Christians are wrestling with this question, especially after the back of lockdown. What is church now? What is my faith? What does that mean? What am I doing here? What are Sundays for? All these questions that people are wrestling with, and there's some people that haven't just connected with church like they used to before lockdown, and they've got these big questions, and they're trying to work out what's going on in life. And it's not just the Christians. Like I said, the internet's changing everything and everyone. So even if you're not a Christian, I'm pretty sure you're still looking around going, kind of, what is going on? The world seems to be a little bit crazy at the moment. And so within that, I thought, what better thing to talk about than 3 eternal things that are never going to change? Let's, amongst all the chaos, turn ourselves to the heartbeat of Christianity. 3 things that Paul said will never, ever change. It is Christianity 101 at its very core. Those 3 things are faith, hope, and love. And so that's a little bit what I want to look at. And most of you, our definitions for hope and love will be relatively similar, and that's okay. But I just want to give a slightly sharpened definition of faith, because sometimes when we talk about religious faith, people tend to think it's kind of a faith and jump into the dark, as opposed to what the Bible talks about it. The Greek word is pistis, means relational faith. It's the kind of faith you would have in a friend. It's the kind of faith, if you said to someone, a friend said to you that they were going to do something, if you had faith that they were going to do it, it was a relational thing. You're not wondering if they exist or not by having faith in them. It's a different kind of thing. And if that's eternal, it kind of makes sense, because it would be a little bit odd to eternally live in a leap of faith. But it does make sense to live eternally in a place of relational trust. So whenever I'm going to try and interchange the word faith and trust as we walk through it. So faith, hope, and love. And obviously these 3 things at the moment are just everywhere in culture. I mean, I pick up my phone and I scroll through the news, and it's just filled with people trusting one another, people so hopeful over the future. I mean, there's so much love just everywhere. Don't you see? I mean, I come off my phone and I just want to skip down the street hugging strangers because I'm just so hopeful. Aren't you? No. No. We laugh because there is so much distrust in everything and everyone, even a huge amount of distrust in religious leaders at the moment. There's a huge amount of hopelessness and a huge amount of loneliness. We just don't feel known and loved. A world empty of hope and love. Interestingly enough, this is the reason why Elon Musk has decided to buy Twitter. He thinks there's not enough hope in the world, and so he's going to try and inject a bit of hope by the way he changes he makes on Twitter. I mean, it can't get much worse, can it? So let's see what he does with it. No, we live in a world that is more focused on the mud and stones of life rather than sifting through in search of the gold of trust, hope, and love. And that is what Christianity is all about, the gold of life. A faith that sustains us, a hope that lifts us, a love that welcomes us. As gold flows down the rivers of our souls, as the light lifts us free from the shadows of doubt, beyond corridors of pain into oceans of life, there is gold to be found, most of it flowing through your veins. Dig for it. Dig for it. And so that is what we're going to focus on. There's also another thing within this idea. A lot of ancient poets and thinkers, actually, you can follow this. A guy called Malcolm Guy gave a talk on Dante through to C.S. Lewis about how the virtues have to dance with one another. It's not okay just to have faith, just to have hope, just to have love. You need them to come together, and they need to perform some sort of dance with one another. And we'll pick up that later. Don't worry if you're not a dancer. We'll help you through it. And so in this sermon series, we are focusing on faith, this idea of faith. And we are doing that by looking at a chapter in the book of Hebrews. Before Easter, before Lent, some of you will remember that we did a whole sermon series on the book of Hebrews, and Emily amazingly unpacked this passage for us, and we have decided to return back to it and taking each of the heroes in this list, in this chapter, and looking at them one by one and trying to understand their story. But for a little bit of context, this writer is, just in case you've forgotten or just in case you're new here, what we're doing is, this letter was written to a group of people 2,000 years ago. So they were in another one of these massive upheavals and cycles. Actually, they were just about to witness the destruction of the temple, which is an interesting event. And so they are questioning and wrestling, and they're in this difficult time. They've been a Christian for a little bit, and they're wrestling with what to do with it. And the writer is writing them to try and encourage them to keep going. And one of the ways in which they do that is they gather a long list of all the people that they admire. It would be like me grabbing all the people that you aspire to be, all your favorite people, all the people that you look up to, all the people that you might have had posters on the walls or the books that you've read. If I took all those people together that you look up to and I said all these people had one thing in common, just one. And in order to live the success that they did, you just need to follow this one thing. And this is what the writer has done. And the one thing that they've picked out is faith. Faith. And we are going to look at it. And we're going to look, I'm going to give you an overview of the entire passage. This is a little bit my formulation of it, my words. If you want to know more, there's a book written by a guy called David Gooding that I'd highly recommend. You can get it for free on his website. Come and find me for more. But this is the list of heroes that came up. We're going to show it in two sections. You have faith in creation, sacrifice, joyous rescue, salvation, faith's first steps, promised destination, fruitfulness. Then we have faith's redirection, refinement, confidence, hiddenness, refusal, rejection, Passover, escape, power, welcome, faith, victories, and sufferings, finishing with Jesus. And like you have seen on the side, the writer puts this into two groups. The first one, can we just go back a second? The first one is faith's basic teachings, its journey, and then the second section, back again, is faith's testing, refinements, and battles. And it all finishes with Jesus. Got that? Brilliant. Cool. Let's move on. No, I'm joking. The reason why I want to show you that is because I don't know if you've ever heard this idea, and some people say it a lot, that faith is a kind of an emotional crutch for people that need that kind of thing, and it's not a particularly intellectual thing, or it's these Bible, the people who wrote the Bible, nice people, lovely intentions, but just a little bit simple in their minds. They hadn't, all the technology and advancements that we have. They didn't have any of that. And actually, part of the reason for showing this is because this is just one chapter of the Bible. And look at its depth. And this is why the idea of faith is, in a word, profound. And what I mean by profound is the idea of faith is so simple that Amy can teach on a Sunday morning the smallest kids of our church, can teach them what it means to understand, to relationally trust God. But it is also so deep and rich that Oxford and Cambridge could be writing doctorates for thousands of years and never fully plumb its depths. Faith is a profound concept. And that's why actually my warning, especially any of you that are in education at the moment, there's a tendency to be a little bit dismissive of any wisdom that's about 20, that's a little bit old, that's any older than about 20 to 30 years. And I would just warn you to not throw out ancient wisdom, because these people they thought deeply about what they said, and there's a huge amount in there that we can unpick and learn from. There's another way of putting this, and that's why at the bottom it says, actually let me just move on to, can we just go to Hebrews 12? Is that all right? The whole list, the writer finishes like this. Therefore, since we are surrounded by such a great cloud of witnesses, let us throw off everything that hinders us and the sin that so easily entangles us, and let us run with perseverance the race marked out for us, fixing our eyes on Jesus, the pioneer and perfecter of our faith. And that's the idea. That's that line that I just want to focus on, that he, pioneer, or another word is founder, the founder and perfecter of our faith. What the writer has done is crafted this beautiful list and then said it is all founded and perfected on Jesus. So look to him. Look to him. Another way of summing up that entire list is that faith has a beginning, a journey, a crucifixion, and a resurrection for all of us, fixed on Jesus Christ. And so, I want to just pick up some overall bigger themes that are consistent throughout this entire list. I'm also going to touch upon how Noah fits into that as well. So if we can just move on to themes, please. These are some of the things that almost in all of these stories seem to reoccur. Faith is something active, not passive. It moves people to do things. In all of these stories, people did something. They got up as a result of their faith and did something. Faith is active, not passive. It is rich and beautiful and diverse, big and small. All of these stories are different because the people are different. God doesn't do copies. Your faith won't look like the person next to you. It won't look like Noah's. It won't look like Abraham's. It will be yours. And sometimes there's such, if you read this, there's such diversity. Sometimes people do the biggest things. But also if you were here last week and heard about Enoch, all Enoch did was walk with God. The small things. Faith has big moments and small moments, beautifully diverse. It is both individualistic and family orientated. You see that running through as a theme as well. It is focused on an individual and their relationship with God themselves. But that faith is always pointed towards community. It is always pointed towards family, towards others, towards sharing, towards communion, in a word. It has its challenges and its sufferings. Many of the people in those stories had, I've learned a new Spanish word, choque. Is it Spanish? Sam is not looking happy at me with my pronunciation of that. It's a bit of like a relational tension. Do you know when you have a friend and there's a bit of tension and you kind of fight up against it, it's called kind of choque. Choque? Getting there. Thank you. Receive that encouragement. There's a challenge, and quite often that challenge is between that individual and God. That when it comes with faith, there's a wrestle between God's ideas and our ideas and that tussle. It also has its sufferings, and many people in this room will have experienced that, walked with God and knows that it has its sufferings. It is not always an easy walk. But there is grace and mercy. You see that list, there are people that fell, that made a mess, that didn't get it always right, that tripped up on their walk. But there is grace and mercy abounding. Thank you, Jesus. There is grace for us when we get it wrong. And finally, there is a future hope and glories, a final victory. And that's what it talks about with Jesus, fixing our eyes on Jesus, the victor of our faith. And so I want to pick up this idea of why it is important that faith, hope, and love need to dance. Okay? You could do all of these things of faith in faith alone without hope and without love. If you did it without hope, it would by and large be a very heavy burden that you would carry. And it's what's often known as stoicism. You could have an active faith, you could have your own faith, you could be orientated, but if it's not fused with hope, it becomes this burden that you have to carry and lump around. Whereas Jesus said, my burden is light because there is a hope. And so that's why faith and hope need to dance. It's the same with love. You could have faith in some of the teachings of Christianity and not have love, and it could be cold, and it can be dark, and it can be closed-hearted. But the idea of faith is that it also needs to dance with love, infused with its warmth, with its kindness, with its ease, with its intimacy. We can have faith that Jesus died and rose again, but does it also fill us with hope and love? And that's the point of it. This active faith, a light burden filled with warmth. And so you can see the story of Noah fitting into this in many ways. Noah's activity was that he built an ark. Hadn't been done before, and it's not been done since. It's beautifully diverse. He was given the message by God, but he also did it to save his family. It was orientated between not just his family, but the animals that came in by two by two. It wasn't just for him, it was about for everyone. It had its challenges. It would have taken him a long time to do it. It would not have been easy. He would have had to collaborate. He would have been so out of its depth. The ark that Noah built, it was so big that the only floating vessel we have seen since of that size, or the vessel that has become bigger than that, was made about 150 years ago and recently in the invention of steel. And that is because it was made of wood. And this is a slight side note, but this is some of the issues that some of the scientists have with the story of Noah, and I'll give you a little insight as to where they go slightly wrong. The reason why the ark shouldn't float, and that is because it is made of wood, and it is so big that it will bridge across multiple waves. And when you have a boat that bridges across multiple waves, it twists and it turns. And if you have a boat made of wood that twists and turns, when it twists, little gaps form. Therefore, water floods in, and you have a problem. Scientists come along and go, look, this is not possible. Therefore, this isn't possible. This whole story is ridiculous. Get rid of it. In other words, what they're saying is they miss the fact that the designer is not human. The designer of the boat is God. So in other words, what they're saying is this boat isn't humanly possible, which is kind of the point of the whole story, if you think about it. And this is an issue. So many scientists, love them to pieces. They are trying to find an answer to all the stories in the Bible that doesn't include God in it. They're trying to find natural explanations for it. But the whole point of the story is it can't be done that way. If you start with, in the beginning God, then the Bible makes sense. If you start with, in the beginning nothing, you're going to struggle to make sense of the book. Side note, sorry, I got detracted. I'll rein it back in. Where was I? I know I've got detoured when my iPad shuts off. That's bad news. And so Noah did all these wonderful things. But I also just want to reframe the metaphor that some of us might have in our mind. Sometimes we throw ourselves into these stories, and we can have a tendency to throw ourselves into the story at slightly the wrong point. We are not Noah. Today, Jesus is Noah. And we are Jesus' family, helping him build his ark. And the ark is the church. So we get to partner, like Noah's family did in helping him build his ark, in helping Jesus build his ark. And so what do we do next? Where do we go from here? That's the question. I want to take a moment just to look at this list for those here who aren't Christians, to encourage you, if you're sat here going, what is Christianity all about? I want to use this list to encourage you and invite you. Faith, when you step into faith with Jesus, you won't be passive in life. He will want you to be an active participant. He is not going to force himself upon you. He will invite you to take an active step. Faith in Jesus will be rich and beautiful and diverse. It will be a journey that he longs to take on, sometimes filled with small things, sometimes filled with massive things. It is diverse. You aren't going to be asked to be anyone else other than your authentic self, because Jesus loves you. Like I said, it will be individualistic, but it will also be family orientated. When you step into relationship with Jesus, you also step into a relationship with his church, a community, people here. You will be treated as an individual, but also part of a group. There will be challenges. There will be sufferings. There will be times where you won't always get it right, but there will be grace and mercy flowing for you, and a future hope and a glory, a final victory. There will be these eternal things of faith, hope, and love. And can I plead with you from the bottom of my heart to take that seriously, to consider it. The choice is yours. No one's going to force you. The offer is open. Okay. Christians, those of you sat here, this list, these heroes of the faith as we walk through it, like I said, will not tell you how you are going to live your life. It tells the story of how they lived their life. For us to work out what it means, we're going to have to do what it said in Hebrews 12. We are going to have to fix our eyes on Jesus. We're going to have to, yes, learn the lessons, yes, hear the stories, because we don't have to start with a blank page. We get to learn all the rich history, we get to learn the mistakes that other people made, so we don't have to try and go at it alone. But each and every one of us at some point needs to sit and look at Jesus face to face, fix our eyes on him, and realize that he is looking back at us, that he is looking back at you, and is wanting, longing to take you on a journey. In each of these, if you read through Hebrews 11, you'll see the same phrase, and Emily picked up on this in her sermon, that the same phrase, by faith Abraham, by faith Enoch, by faith Noah. I want you tonight to put your name there and finish the sentence. By faith Jim what? By faith you what? What's it going to mean and look like in your life? I want to be honest with you. I've been wrestling a lot with church at the moment. I started with people questioning about church, and I'm definitely in that space. You ask anyone who spent any small amount of time with you, you will know. Please pray for Jenny, my line manager, who has to put up with my wrestlings and my questions. She is so filled with grace and allowing me to do that. But part of the reason I came to Words is because I knew, because of lockdown and COVID and everything was going, and I feel like there's change and shift happening with the church, I decided that I wanted to join a church as the place where I could wrestle with some of these things. And one of the main reasons why is I wanted to wrestle in community. Not isolated on my own. I wanted to walk with people and talk with people. So I wasn't just wrestling with the ideas of church and what's going on and what my faith means and what are the internal things and what are the stuff that might shift and change. But I wanted to be surrounded by people as I did it. So can I encourage you, if you're in a place where you're questioning your faith, where you're questioning what's going on, we want to invite you into the conversation. We want to, in this chaotic, upside-down world, where everything can begin to feel like it's shifting and moving, we want to find a space for you where you can explore together in community. And then one of the other main reasons why I decided to come to this church is that I've always felt that there was a prophetic openness here. I came here when it first started. Derby is my hometown. And so I came here often, and every time I seemed to walk in the door, I seemed to encounter the presence of God, and there seemed to be just a prophetic openness in this space. I know and lots of you I know have experienced this, some of you haven't, but is one of what drew me to this community and wanting to hear God, to fix my eyes on him for myself. And I always felt like this was a great space in which to do that, and I want to really, my hope and my prayer is that it is the same for you. And as I close, does the band want to come up? So be free as we journey through these names together, be lifted, be challenged, be encouraged. There is space for you. And as we delve into faith, I hope that you will still begin to dance with hope and love as we journey through it.